All right, guys. So we've got a lot of people in this course. A lot of people signed up. And what we decided to do is, instead of turning people away, we decided to kind of open up the system a little bit. So let me talk a little bit administration-wise about stuff. And then we can kind of get down to business of what we're doing. Let me start my drawing tool so I can do that. And feel free, let me know if my audio comes in and out at any point. Should be fine. Our internet connection's pretty solid. Okay, so first, how do you access the course? Let's say maybe you haven't even gotten logged in and you've just got the GoToWebinar or that type of stuff. Right now, since we're between platforms, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. If you come into just ZBrush workshops and you go to the My Account page, I'm going to let it load. Could also be my system is doing something if you have audio problems, so do not hesitate to let me know. I'm going to see what could be. No, it's pretty minimal. Okay. Let's get back to the come on. It could be my site, my computer too, guys, so let me know. All right, signing into the class. So you go to ZBrush Workshops. If you go to the My Account, it's going to take you over to the old system. Okay, and this is going to get swapped out in the next day or two, I think. It was sending people to the old system because we had so many people enrolled in classes on the old platform. That has now shifted. We have more people in the new classes, and the old classes are slowly ending. So here's a quick trick for you. If you get to the old hub, you can just go to ZBrush Workshop/user, and that'll take you to the login for this platform. Both ways do it. This is just a quicker way. So sorry about that, but it'll be just a today, tomorrow, maybe a 3-day thing that we have to deal with. All right. So now that done and said, once you're signed into the new side of things, you're going to be looking at a My Account page. And I just did the classic mistake. Let's look at the user page. And remember, this is the URL, and it's a little hard to access because My Account goes to the old platform. Okay. All the old classes, if you've taken them, are moved to the new platform. So as soon as we change things, then the redirects will happen, and you'll be going to the new stuff or the old stuff, depending on where it stays. You have access to the Atelier bundle, creating a basic figure, getting started, how to use scan data, introduction to ZBrush, all of that stuff, repetitive patterns, and we'll be accessing and talking about this stuff a little bit. Okay, but then here's my certificate course. This is what I'm going to. This is all in the new platform. If you're in the hub, it just looks different, but it's the same kind of thing. Okay, so we've made this a little clearer on your curriculum page. You should immediately have access to module 1 through 4, I think. So that's your first ZBrush lesson, feature framework, and week 1. So sorry, that's module 3. Okay, as of Tuesday, you'll get week 2. And you can see the dates are now on them. So those are the dates that we are going to make them accessible to you during the day, Los Angeles time. So if you're in India or if you're in Europe, it'll be much later in the evening that you'll get access to it on that Tuesday. Okay, and then on from there. Now, if you try to go into these, you'll just see a coming soon sign. That's about it. Unless you have taken this class before, in which case all of that content is in there already for you. So we have the curriculum, but there's two other things that are going to be really important to keep in mind. So questions is one that's going to be really relevant. But remember, you have access to your mentor. And Nate is the one mentoring this October session, so you have access via email to him to solve your problems and help you with stuff. Okay, and then we've also got these live meetings. Okay, and then you've got projects. Okay, so let's take a look at questions first. Okay, some questions already in here, and you can see the answers for them there. All right, projects, you can see some of the older projects. You can also filter by week, so let's filter by week 1. There's a lot of projects here, a lot. You can see some of them are from the last time we ran this class. So that'll give you a hint for what to do, and people who have done the work before, that can also help you. If you're going to create a project, you select the week that you want to create that project for, and you click Post, go through the process, upload your image, and there you go. It'll post it right in here. Okay, any questions about this side of it before I move on? Let me look into the questions right now. Stephen, our old classes will still be available to us when it's done. Yep. They're all being moved over, and they're already moved over, sorry. Thomas V, can we download all of a module instead of lecture by lecture? No, you can only do it lecture by lecture, unfortunately, and that's just, it's because the system is set so that we provide that lecture ID, and then it will automatically allow us provide the download for that. So it's not possible to like have a system zip them up for you and provide a download. That is, especially with videos and the file size here, if you think downloading is painful, imagine hundreds of people zipping up gigabytes of information on a server. That would be not a lot of fun. Okay, Reese, you have Atelier bundle access. Yes. Catherine, you will be posting projects, i.e. imagery. So there's no ZTL or anything like that. I know it's a little bit of a misnomer because of the projects inside of ZBrush. But this system is kind of designed to work for clay, for painting, for Maya, Modo, 3D Studio Max, all that. So we just use the word project. Blake, yeah, it's possible they haven't fully transferred, or it's not that redirects haven't been transferred yet. Keith, can you go into more details about how to upload projects? I can. Oops. Let me make a note. I'll do that later. T-Laws, I don't see the 10 that you just showed on your screen yet, the bundle. Okay. T-Laws, will make sure that you have that. I'll have them apply the Atelier bundle again to everybody. Steve, will you or Nate be reviewing the projects this time? And that's actually something I want to talk to you guys about, so we'll check. Because this is a CERT program, we're reviewing projects, of course, but the primary thing is the test results. Do you pass the tests and answer the questions correctly? That's the primary thing. So now with our system having projects a little bit cleaner than the way we had it before, we've got a couple of options that I want to explore with you guys. Okay, going through the questions. Jose is asking about everybody's name in the GoToWebinar interface. You can only see audience. In this particular system, you cannot see the full name. Otherwise, it shows full name and email address. Don't know why anybody would ever want to do that, but Robert, can we ask about reference books to follow along the modules? Roberto? Of course you can. And Catherine, I don't really need turnarounds, but if you can provide 2 views, that's always obviously quite helpful. Jack, looks like we've had a mistake and people have not, they did not post the Atelier bundle to you guys, so as I'm saying this, they're probably fixing that. Michael, there was a 3rd test. I'll have to check with you. And Catherine, how does the testing work? So Catherine's asking, if you fail a test, how does that whole thing work? So that's a great question. Let's talk about the cert and what that's all about. So as you know, this is a cert course, right? But what does certification mean? Because Pixologic has literally refused to do certification. When I worked there, I built the platform for it, and then it just died. There was a guy who came in after me that also kind of built that platform, and that died. And then there was another guy, and so this has been something they're flirting with. It hasn't happened. So what does cert mean? The primary thing, as you know from the email and the conversations that we've had leading up to this, the primary element of certification is listing on our site. Okay, this is where we advertise you and say you know ZBrush, and we provide your email or your website, whatever you're really choosing to make available to people. Okay, the other thing is you're going to really learn ZBrush, from the algorithms up. That's the way I say it. That's the marketing language. But that has a really important element, which is that I want you to learn how to develop your own workflows. And that's key. So if you saw the sculpting dynamic hair video that I did, that showed you how to create that clay coil brush, that was done from a very strong understanding of ZBrush. And it was a very difficult problem. I tried various permutations for probably 2 years, and longer than that, and I never quite got the results that I wanted. Now, obviously I ended up using a feature like insert brush, okay, and the features inside ZBrush are pretty set. You can't really customize them. But what's really important is just applying your knowledge of these features to specific problems. That's the thing that's really important to me in the CERT program, is just applying your knowledge of features and what they connect with, how to think about it. How does the insert mesh relate to geometry levels? Let's say, for example, if we have a rule that we have to keep proper topology for our model all the time, the insert mesh brush really kind of messes with that. So what is Pixologic's rule? How does that change for things like insert mesh? How do they think about topology? Well, that's what I'm going to be teaching you in the class, is how they think about topology, how they think about polygon management, so you can even get a sense of what's coming down the pike. And Catherine, I went off on your tangent. So let's talk about the cert. So there's a couple of things that are really important to know about it. Of course, there's the lifetime access, right? Okay, there's the free upgrades. Okay, as long as Pixologic's offering free upgrades, we're offering free upgrades. And what that means is that if you miss a test, you can take it again. If you aren't able to take the test this time around, you can take it later. Not a problem. Okay, we're here for you. As long as things are flowing, you're studying, you're working, then we're going to be around for when you're ready to take the test. Steven's asking, is this course designed to also help us, I lost the question, to also help us develop our portfolios? This course is really designed to make you kind of a ZBrush guru. Okay, so that means learning ZBrush. It also means learning a little bit about how to sculpt. Okay, the best way to develop your portfolio is to take one of the master classes, like the one with Danny Williams or Chris Costa, or Furio or Peter or Steve Lord. That is hands down the best way to develop your portfolio. Halloween, you can miss the live. We are recording it. So let's talk about the structure of the class a little bit. He's asking if he can miss it. So what are we doing? What's the structure of this course? You've already seen that there are lectures. Okay, and these are the pre-recorded elements. And in this particular case, they come from the last time I ran the class. That each class differs. Sometimes they're created in advance, sometimes they're created on the fly. So you've got your lectures, which you're seeing here, your first ZBrush lesson, feature, framework, all of that. Okay, and then you've got your live sessions. And you'll note that there's a live session on Saturday and there's a live session on Thursday. Okay, how do these live sessions interact with the pre-recorded sessions? What are we supposed to be doing? The way I want you to think about this is that the lectures are the course material. So this is the foundation stuff. You need to know what's in these lectures. The live sessions, you could also call these practicums. It's kind of that university term for it, which means that the lectures up top, this is your reading material. The live sessions are when we get in and start to put it into practice. So in terms of our class here, the practicums are when we expand on the content a little bit and we put it into different uses and into a little bit more variety. So every week you're going to have lectures that cover core content, and then you're going to have 2 sessions to choose from to involve yourself in a live kind of demonstration, basically, a live practical demonstration. So for example, today I'm going to sculpt a face, but I'm going to do it a little looser. I'm not going to focus on all of the elements that you need to know, because I'm going to assume, as we are going to assume every time, that you have watched the pre-recorded lectures. You have done your reading so that we can get into the live session and start to dig a little deeper. And it's in these practicums that we can start to do things like give you tools to work on your portfolio and give you tools to develop your work. So I'll talk a little bit about anatomy today and a little bit about form. It's not part of the testing, but because we have the lectures and the reading already done, we can get a little bit more jazzy. Saturday and Thursday are basically duplicates of each other. You only really need to attend one, and they are recorded so you can watch them later. Any questions about that? I'm looking through. I will be using ZBrush R6, and it's R6 P2, I think. Thomas, there are 3 tests, one at week 5, one at week 8, and one at week 10, if I remember. You can retake the tests if you fail. You can, that's a yes. Mark, great. Bundles are in everybody's account. Good. Jason, you can see the, you're going to have new content released. So here's week 2. It should be, hopefully this is clear enough for you that we're in week 1 right now. So week 2 we're going to enter into soon. Week 3, and I've put the dates up there. So I hope that that helps, Jason. Let me know if that answers your question. Matthew, practicums are recorded and they are uploaded. Charles, at what point should I be through the pre-recordings? You should be through them before the next session. So Today's a little odd because some people are registering. So week 1, you can be through it this week or next week. It's up to you. But basically this week I'm going to go over this stuff. So today is Saturday, so I'm going to go over this. Okay. Next Saturday I'm going to go over this stuff. So this content's going to be released Tuesday. You do not have to, like absolutely 100%, have that reading material done. This is online learning. As long as you stay fairly organized, you know, you have a lot of flexibility, and I take advantage of that. And I find that very important. You can download this content so you can keep it, but it's also on the website for you to just instantly go to and get it. Christopher, which comes first, Saturday or Thursday? Well, it's Saturday today, so Saturday comes first. Omar, you are not meant to have gone to the lectures already because this is a special week, so don't worry about that. Fred, tests are multiple choice and true and false. Matthew, I went through the material. It only went to Module 2. Is this class based on Module 3 knowledge? Don't worry, it is based on Module 3. Today we are doing Week 1's work. But I'll give you plenty of this. Okay, now if you have any problems during the week, email Nate. Okay, don't hesitate. If you're in LA, or sorry, if you're in North America, give us a call. Okay, we can help on the phone too. This is what we do. Jason, due dates, because we don't have, because this isn't portfolio driven, the due dates are very flexible. The most important thing is, as I said, our tests. But you should complete week 1 before we get to next week's session. And, you know, if it makes sense, I can go back through here, but we can also just push this release date of information back. But some people have already kind of gone through week 3. Matthew, questions is definitely a very good place to be posting the questions that you have, okay? But I am very interested in making this a little bit more flexible for you guys, so I'm not going to force you to go into the questions tab at this point. If you have questions, you can post them here, but we're also available via email. We're also available via phone. My goal is to provide as many avenues as possible for you. It's also part of the business where we are figuring out which channels to continue and which to discontinue, and what are the most helpful for people. Obviously, the most ideal situation from a business perspective is we ask people to post in the questions, and then we have one place to check. Okay, but I'm not at the point where I want to close any systems down yet. My focus right now is being available. Okay, Brian Beatty. Is there a PDF of the module course just available for printout? If not, it's just a copy and paste. Yeah, no, there's none, no syllabus per se. It's a copy and paste. It's also not hard for us to provide that. So if Nate has a moment in the next week or 2, he can put that together for you guys. All right, I think I got through all your questions. And that's our first half hour. So any other questions before we move forward, go ahead and give me a shout out. Otherwise, we had a couple of things. We wanted to upload projects. How do you do projects? So let me show you guys that real quick and see if you come up with any more questions. So select your week. We're going to go into week 1, and we're just going to say post. Okay, I don't want to add it because it's literally, this should be the last step, but you title your work, you choose your work, you can change the course if you really want to, if you accidentally did this in the wrong course, and you choose your week. In this case, it's week 1. And then you hit save. So I hope that answers the question. It's really, really simple. It's designed to be really simple. And it'll get even simpler and more powerful, where we'll have filtering tools and you'll have them by your username as well. It's designed to be simple so that you post projects, so that we engage you in projects. Joanne, I don't want to, there are a ton. I'll have somebody put that in chat, but this video can be viewed later, so the number of students in this can grow, but we have over 100 in this, in both runs of the class. So lots. That's why we get to, that's why we're doing 2 live sessions. And these live sessions may change and become Hangouts. What I'm looking for is what works for you guys and what's the best. So, all right. Steve is asking, how do I get to the curriculum page? So I'll just ask for Nate or Kevin to jump in and see if they can help him. But in short, actually I should just go over that again, Steve. Go to zbrushworkshops.com/user. You'll either have to log in or you'll be on that page. As soon as you go into the curriculum, or as soon as you go click your ZBrush certificate course, it will take you there. And the curriculum is the first page that you're on, but these tabs along the top will get you there as well. Mark understands our back end. Glad to hear. Send me an email. We're always looking for more information on the programming. Programming has been fun, and it is a beast. So let me tell you guys, this is the first iteration of the system that for me is working. Okay, we are going to be developing this system more expansively as this class goes on and as everything else happens. We have programmers that work full-time with us, and we are looking to make this as simple and as awesome an experience as possible so that you are on this site learning. Okay, there are things that need to be fixed, there are things that need to be made better, so do not hesitate to send that to me. All right. Catherine, she's asking, does the question page replace the form? Yeah, that's a good question. Catherine, I am not, technologically speaking, I'm not a big fan of forums because they're very, very hard to interact with. So with the number of students that we deal with, we are looking to customize the way things happen, and questions is what we're working on right now to replace that. But it also includes questions and projects. So for example, one of the problems that I experience in forums is people will post questions in a forum, and they'll post images in a forum, and then they'll post comments to each other in a forum, and then I never know after 2 pages, 3 pages, where that question is. It takes me a long time. So what we're trying to do is just do that one better. Hope that answers it. Charles, might seem like a lot of work. Don't worry, take your time, breathe slowly. If you can't if you're very busy and you work full-time and you just can't watch these lectures, come to the practicums. Okay? I'm going to go over a lot of stuff. I'm going to explain it. But if you're a beginner and you really need to know every single step, you're going to want to make sure you take the time and you watch the pre-recorded. So it's kind of an either or. I'm going to go slower in the pre-recorded. I'm going to go a little faster in the practicum. All right, guys. So that should be about every question. Let's see. Anything else I want to deal with? No. So you can skip module 1, 2, and you can just jump into week 1. This is what we're going to talk about today. And in there I give you an introduction to the course and we walk through everything that we're going to do. But what I want to do right now is just jump into the sculpting side of things. So let me move this over to the other page and that over there. So we're seeing ZBrush. Okay. All right, Thomas, Nate or Kevin can help you with that question. They'll post an answer. I'm going to move my keyboard over. Okay, so what we want to do now is get in and do, for some of us, our first sculpt. For others, it's our 10,000th head. For others, it's going to be, you know, maybe the third or fourth. You're going to sculpt heads. Everybody sculpts heads. It's the easiest thing to do inside of ZBrush. It's going to give us the tools that we need. And I'm going to keep this real simple, so maybe I'll sculpt a couple of heads. What I want to focus on today, you guys hearing my audio okay? And just give me a quick shout out if you hear audio or whatnot. All right, great. So what I want to do today is talk about not just the tool, but also, you know, the mental stuff that's happening and the artistic stuff. So let's set this up a couple of different ways, and you'll have to bear with me. I'm on the psychological side of things, so I'm going to go a little new agey on you, but I'm also going to be focused on making sure that you're prepared to be, you know, an awesome sculptor. So we're going to do we're going to kind of oscillate. We're going to be talking about mechanical stuff, okay, and we're going to just be talking about the psychological stuff. Okay, mechanical stuff is something like the feature. It's how to use a brush. Okay, psychological is obviously it's stuff like your self-esteem, which we're not going to be talking about, but it is also things like why do I suck as an artist? You know, why does this form not work? Why is this just not looking right? Right? You got to cover that stuff because as you sculpt, you're going to have, you know, the critic hanging over your shoulder, talking about your work right into your ear. Okay, so we got to make sure we're neutralizing him or giving him something to do. But then the other side of that is the artist brain. Okay, and so this includes things like form, gesture, okay, all that stuff that we have to learn. Structure. Some of this is mechanical. Some of it is just, it all has to be built inside your brain. So I want to focus a little bit on this stuff today while we're focusing on the mechanical side of using ZBrush. So let's start with the default sphere. I just started ZBrush from scratch. This light box is open. Default sphere is here. As soon as I go there, I have symmetry on, so transform, activate X, symmetry is on. I have the standard brush active. It has Z add and it has Z intensity kind of already set for me. So let me take like just 2 minutes and go over basic stuff for those who are brand new to it, but if you are brand new, make sure you're going through the lectures. Okay. So we've got the shelf up here which contains modifiers, you've got brushes, and then you've got navigation over here. They call these things quick palettes. To be honest, they actually do not have a real name. When I worked there, I tried to name them, and quick palettes was about as far as we got. Otherwise, the dev team was like, I don't know, it's just a button. you just push. Large thumbnail. You'll see them refer to the large thumbnail in the tool palette. What? Why don't you just give it a name? So when we are navigating and moving around the model, okay, I'm going to be using shortcuts the entire time. But if you're brand new, make absolutely certain that you are using these buttons off to the side. And also make sure that you are checking out the pop-up help. So you hover over it and you press Control. This is not a child's play help system. This is really, really robust, and I tell people this story every time. I remember my first job at Pixologic was going down to, or up to ILM to train the guys up there. And I was not fully up to speed on ZBrush. So I would be going and doing things like, oh yeah, and if you want to do this, well, first thing, if you really want to know about this feature, you just hover over this and press Control. And I was literally reading it as I was talking. So then I would let go of Control, and then I would do a quick demo on the fly of what that feature was and what it could do. So do not over or underestimate it. Control, hover. You get the hotkey. So you can use Move here, you can use Scale up and down, and you can use Rotate. I know plenty of artists who create amazing work that still use those buttons. To this day, they will produce commercial work in ZBrush and still use these buttons. So if you're using them, don't sweat it. Not a big deal. All right, I see some questions. Okay, I'll let them answer this. All right, now that's the navigation side of things. The next thing that we need to be thinking about is this idea of Z-add and Z-sub in combination with the brush that we're choosing. You draw on the surface, and again, this is for those beginners. You draw on the surface, and it's adding form. You go to Z-sub, and it's subtracting form. And if you press Alt, it switches. So all Alt does, Alt on the keyboard, is switch from one to the other, whichever one is active. So now Z-add is active. Press Alt, Z-sub will be the one that's active. All right, and then if you press Shift on the keyboard, everything gets smoother. Now, since we're in a practicum, I can go a little deeper into the Shift button. How do you make this a little bit stronger? Okay, so one of the ways that you make it stronger is you increase your brush size. But then, of course, it's quite global, right? So let's check out the brush palette here. And if I remember right, there were some modifiers. So weighted strength, weighted smooth. Where did we put that? How is that companion? Okay, so weighted mode, you can see some different types of strokes in here. We've got 0 for standard, 1 for stronger. Oops. Click. Let's go into weighted strength mode and just set that to 1. Okay, that's one way to get this a little bit stronger. But what if you wanted to do the inverse? If you wanted this to be less strong? If you wanted just a subtle variation? Well, you can press and hold the Shift button. What I want you to do is notice how Z intensity changes. Right now I am not pressing Shift. Now I am pressing Shift. So if you are adjusting the Shift brush, you have to press and hold, and then you adjust it. And so now it's a much softer gradation. You have to press Shift to make that change, though. But this is not the brush that we're going to start with. When we work with a face, we need to work with a particular structure or workflow that's really going to set us up for success. So who knows the first brush that we're going to use? What's the first brush that you would use sculpting a face? Yeah. Everybody's going move, move, move. So move brush is the first one. It's not a necessity, but it makes things really easy. And since you guys already know about this, let's not use it. Let's try to change that up a little bit. And let's go in. I'm going to click to open this, and I'm going to go into this brush called Clay Buildup. And I want you to focus on one specific kind of psychological element, okay? If you, let's say for example, take Steve Lord, okay? Steve Lord could start with a burlap sack of clay. And by the time he is done with that, he would have a beautiful model. He could basically have his fingers, a bunch of clay, nothing else, no knife tool, nothing, and he would end up with something that looked absolutely awesome. Because inside his brain, he knows all of the form that he wants to do. Okay, and so let's put it right here in the center. So he's already got a mental picture that he's going to chop this off, he's going to chop that off, and he knows where he's going to put the holes, he knows where he's going to pull something out or add. He knows all of the form, and he knows how he wants it to be. So he doesn't, his workflow can look a little bit like magic because it comes together so fast we don't see what happens. And so this is the same thing as what athletes do and musicians do. As you become more advanced, knowledge goes deeper and deeper. So things become more and more unconscious. You know, let's say a star tennis player doesn't think about that, you know, that stroke in the same way that somebody who's just learning is thinking about it. If you're just learning tennis, and I played tennis against the Nomen guys, I was horrible. I cannot play tennis to save my life. I would kill the planet if it was all up to me in a tennis game, we would be dead. So I'm thinking at that particular time, I was thinking, well, besides thinking I was pissed off at the stroke and the tennis racket, but I was thinking about it just in a very beginner amateur way. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this thing to swing somewhere close to where I want it. A pro has that stuff a lot more locked down. They've already got several things. Their eye and hand coordination is resolved. They know when to start. They've got the flick of the wrist. They've got the swing from the shoulder, all of that down. And over time, that's what's going to be happening to you. But a lot of that is connecting the ball to the racket, right? Where is the ball? I can't see that fast. And it would take a long time to sublimate that. It's very similar with the face. You see Steve Lord put stuff in, and he'll put little tiny anatomy notes that you can't even really see that he's putting until they get more resolved. We use the move brush, and this is why I'm telling you this. We use the move brush because it is a codified system that makes your life easier. So we would say move to clay buildup, okay, to a knife tool, to clay buildup some more. And we'd kind of go on back and forth around that territory. You don't have to do this, okay? This is just at the beginning, it makes our life easier. But let me just provide something that looks a little bit not so easy. Okay, I'm going to give myself a challenge. I'm going to create a face using nothing but this clay buildup. Okay, and I'm going to try to use just default settings. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to pull out a jaw, push in some eyes. And so I'm using the S key to pull up my hot key here. And then I'm going to press Alt and just carve in. I'm also going to do the anatomy stuff that I already know, which is carve an orbit of the eye in, pull down so that you establish a front of the face, pull under the nose. Okay, and then you get the nose at the same time. So right here we have front plane of the face already established. That's hugely beneficial. I'm going to come and add a little bit more. I'm just adding a little bit so that I can extend that front plane of the face. Because inside my mind, I already know I'm going to chop all that off. Pressing Alt building, and there we go. So it doesn't look very pretty, but we've started. And that's kind of what's important. I'm going to put a little divot in there for the down plane of the brow. I'm going to put a little bit of the frontal eminence in here. And I'm going to start to carve out the side plane. So I'm pressing Alt, and I'm going to put some of that temporal line in, and I'm just going to try to carve that plane. It's very messy. I'm going to try to carve that plane. I'm going to try to put a bit of a jawline in there, like I put the mandible. And let's put the back of the head in here. Okay, and the back of the head's going to require some adjustment. I haven't talked proportion at all. There's 100 things going on inside my mind. I am going to come in mechanically though. I'm going to change the angle of view to 50. 90 is too strong. It's meant for the body. So I'm putting proportional elements in here that you may or may not be aware of. You can tell I'm thinking about strokes, right? That's a stroke coming down in space. That's another stroke coming down in space. And that's helping to round the form, but I'm doing it in these structured way. So you can see it start to develop. You know, here's this down plane, another plane, and then boom, boom. Okay, and then that comes and there you go. You can sculpt with almost anything. It's really knowledge that you're working with. But the tools you use help you get there, get from A to B to Z, depending on your knowledge. Okay. When I've started oil painting again, I haven't painted in I think probably 15 years. I immediately started working with a color palette of like 15 colors, and I about pulled my hair out. I had to limit it down to a Zorn palette of like 5 colors just for me to be able to create something realistic. So I had to come down to burnt sienna, yellow ochre, white, black, and limit myself. And that's why we do it. There are lots of guys, Nelson Shanks, there's lots of people that paint with a full palette. But by limiting myself, I made it easier for me to learn. And you want to do the same thing in the beginning. Okay. And we're really close to the point in which this becomes relevant. The form here is getting really hard to control with just this brush. I'm having to keep a lot of stuff in my mind, like this is not going right. Okay, that orbit of the eye is too big. I've learned a lot. I'm going to shift and smooth that out. So I can get away with some of it, but now you can see, I got to move that whole front of the face back. And it just becomes more challenging. I could have sculpted a face already if I'd have done this a little bit cleaner. But I will get there. Because I have the knowledge. And as you see, that's not even, with this much sculpting, I would have been able to produce something much cleaner and quicker using the move brush. But like I said, I'll get there and I'll move forward. Work with the workflow just to make your life easier. Okay, so let me go now. I'm going to switch, and I'm going to go the correct route. So I'm going to kind of shake this up a little bit. Instead of using the default project, I'm going to load a brand new tool so that I can keep both of them in there. So I'm going to go Tool, polysphere, then close lightbox. And see, polyframe will show that they're both the same. Okay. So now I'm going to go to the Move brush. Where'd you go? Make sure symmetry is on. So I had to come up into Transform and press X, or just press X on your keyboard. Flatten, pull that forward. Lower my draw size, start to sculpt a little bit with it. Okay. Nice, clean, smooth surface for me to start to work on. A good template. So now I can come in, I'm going to use clay buildup. I'm going to just cut that roughly in half and then dig a little deeper for the holes. And then pull down underneath the nose. Temporal line. A little bit for the chin. Okay, now I just start to establish some planes. So one of the things that's really important from the side view, or from this kind of, well, in fact, what angle am I viewing this model at? Notice that I'm looking at this model from below. The sculpting is all about depth. Okay, depth can go in multiple directions. Looking at something from below or from above is one of the key things that we as sculptors do. If you're a painter, you can get away with looking at something straight on and something like that, and then you can kind of paint around the form with color and value and things of that nature, but a sculptor has to actually represent that. So you need to look at the model from below to be able to get the most accurate sense of form. So you'll see me often from this angle. And if we talked about the anatomy, I'm not sure I'll be able to put it in there, but let's just say put the orbit of the eye in there, the temporal line, the glabella. Yeah. Okay. So we've got what's known right here as the frontocephaloidal process of the zygomatic. That word is a paragraph in its own right. And the truth of it is actually a paragraph. What this is saying is that it's a process, which is it's a bony protuberance, something sticking out of a bone. So it's a bony, or how shall I say it? It's an extended part of the zygomatic that connects to the frontal bone and the sphenoidal bone. So sphenoidal bone here, frontal bone here, and the zygomatic, which is what I was just about to draw right there. So the zygomatic is in here. It's a process. It's a bony extension that connects to the frontal bone on one side, and on the other side connects to the sphenoidal bone, another part of the cranium. Pretty crazy, huh? I mean, it's a paragraph just in that label. Anatomy is like this. It's incredibly simple once you know what the heck they're saying. So keep in mind that there is a descriptive process to everything. Like the, which one should I use? So the rectus femoris, no, not the rectus femoris, the vastus lateralis versus the vastus medialis in the leg. Where are those guys located? Medial and lateral, those words tell you. So, but let's get back to this. So right here at the zygomatic, or I should say the mandible, you know, we've got that masseter muscle, and the masseter's connecting up here to the zygomatics, connecting from the mandible, from the ramus up to the zygomatic here, with a little bit of it kind of attaching off to the side there as well. And we've got the zygomatic major coming down to the mouth, orbit of the mouth right in there. And then there's a couple of other things, levitator, labi levitator, you know, various names and stuff going on. There's the triangularis, or the depressor angulari. Okay, you should have access to the anatomy of the face workshop, depending on when you're watching this. That should be something that was added, but if not, it will be. What these do is set us up with planes. So we have the side of the face, we have this front plane, and then we have this transition plane. This transition plane, where this is fully facing the side view, this is fully facing the front view, and we've got our little division in between there, and we have very clear boundaries. Masseter muscle, zygomatic major to the triangularis, or depressor anguli, depending on which text you're reading. So I'm looking at these guys, and I've already kind of set myself up. Masseter, zygomatic major, zygomatic is down to the depressor anguli. This has already happened. Just happened for me. Just need to make it a little bit cleaner. Okay, and I need to adjust this a little bit. This is what I always refer to as the George Bridgman kind of rainbow. You get an arch to an arch to an arch. Okay, this is your zygomatic, your frontal cephenoidal or your brow, and then your frontal eminence. Frontal eminence, brow, zygomatic. If you do that, your work will always look better than if you don't. Now, there are some people in nature that the zygomatic and the brow are exactly the same. And when you look at them, there's always something that seems a little bit different. So keep this in mind. This is something that can exist out in there in nature, but you'll see it. They have really kind of biggish eyes, really clear, big eyes, and really just an expansive brow. Possible in nature, but it'll look a little cleaner if you kind of work on that, on the three arches. Okay, so I'm pushing that in, kind of helping to get a little bit of that frontal cephenoidal a little bit cleaner. Let's get that zygomatic. I'm going to get the, what's known here as the frontal process of the, what would that next part be? I'm going to ask you guys. What bone sits in this area? It's right in the front of the face. It's amazing to me how important this bone is. This bone contributes, from my perspective, almost all of the different racial changes happen right here in this bone, the maxilla. So the frontal process of the maxilla, that means what? It's like it's a process. So it's basically something that's sticking out and away from it or connecting to something. This is a trick I do all the time. You see how I cut the brow along the top, kind of follow that along, but what the trick part is take that brow and really bury it in. That brow, sorry, I don't mean to confuse you when I'm throwing this many words at you. That's not the brow. This is the lower part of the orbit of the eye. Okay, this line, this green line I'm drawing right here, this has a word. It's called the infraorbital margin. That's the anatomical term. Anybody know what a margin is? It's such a strange thing. I mean, I know what a margin is, but you know, how does that relate to anatomy? It's just a line. Why do they call it a margin? I don't know. But it's a line. So it's the margin between, you know, one form and another. It's just a line. Yep. Transition between planes, as Thomas says. And for me, the easier way to think about it is it's a line in space that I can track. Of course, there will be a point where you want to think about it as a transition, but this is a pretty simple way. So I get that margin, that line, to kind of follow up and really help me kind of spiral the orbit of the eye, because that's what it does. And then let's build that glabella out a little bit. Cool. Superciliary arches. You're going to want to see that anatomy lecture after this if you're not already familiar. If you want to see superciliary arches, take a look at Richard McDonald's work. You'll see these like massive superciliary arches. And so he uses them to great effect. Frontal eminence. Sometimes a frontal eminence is one form, sometimes it's two forms. Anybody know what this line is called up at the top? Anybody want to take a guess? Sagittal crest. You don't probably want to put that in females too much. You definitely want to use it on aliens. If you've seen a chimpanzee, or if you've seen a gorilla skull, then you've seen it. Or if you've seen canine skulls, you'll see they have this bone, and then basically their brain case is actually deeper down. Their brain case is here, but they have this massive crest that lifts up, basically providing room for a very thick muscle that's coming wrapping down around to the jaw in different places. That sagittal crest, I hate to say it, but we're all still animals. I know, say it isn't true, but we all know a couple of dudes that would have made life better as an ape. Okay, sagittal crest. If you have kids, you'll have learned about these guys. Nuchal lines, nuchal ligaments. They used to test for that, for Down syndrome, things of that nature. They still do, I'm sure. But the last time for my son Adi, we just did a blood test, which is more accurate and yada yada yada. Okay. Built it up. This is not uncommon. You see me building up and pulling back. When I teach, I'm not looking around at all the forms, so it's very common for me to do that, to kind of overreach an area. Mound for the mouth. Building up slowly. Okay, but you can see very important structural elements here. You can see the front plane of the face. Look at that. Okay, with a nose coming out. You can see the brow, you can see all of these structural elements, front, sides, you get that transition as well. That's nice. A little bit of a mound in there as well. So let's stop. Let me take a look at some questions. I saw one that I thought was really cool. Charles, does the build-up brush add polygons? All right, let's take a look. Polyframe. What the build-up brush does, and we go over this a lot more in the next week or so, but what the build-up brush does is it just takes the polygons that are there, pushes them out. That's all it does. It's called build-up to distinguish it from tubes and clay, and because of one feature that I'm going to show you right now, but that's as far ahead as I'm going to go because I don't want to steal your thunder for later. There's a feature in samples called build-up. See if you can figure out what this does. But that's why it's called build-up, because it makes use of that feature. Don't worry, what I want you guys to do this week is really just sculpt faces. You know, I'm going to sculpt one face here, I'll probably sculpt another face. Just sculpt faces. We're going to get a lot more robust, so don't sweat that. All right, Deborah, I will give you more time. Sorry. Let's see. Catherine, cumulative, absolutely. That's one way to think about it, but it's a little bit different. You're talking about the build-up brush, right? But you know what? Cumulative is actually a really good word, I think, for what it is. And the full phrase for the build-up would be what? It's cumulative. There's more to that sentence. Oh, we're coming up into Halloween. You're right. Cool. Definitely additive. All right. I'm going to let you guys keep stewing on that one. What does the clay build-up brush do? It's very, very amazing. The one thing, if you've seen the lectures, the one thing that's really important for you to remember about all clay brushes is that they are topology independent. The lectures are going to go into this a lot more. But topology independent means probably the first rule that you need to learn about how ZBrush thinks about topology. And that rule is it doesn't want to think about topology. It only wants to think about topology as far as is necessary for an artist to create their visions. I mean, I could have pulled that out of the developers' heads. That's basically what the way they think about it. That's why things like Dynamesh came about, is they didn't want organized topology. Organized topology is difficult. It is one of the most advanced problems to solve. The reason why humans still do organized topology for animation characters, and organized topology, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, is getting an edge loop around here, and then connecting all of these guys so that when they animate, everything flows smoothly, and Maya can handle it. Okay. Organized topology is literally one of the most advanced mathematical questions to deal with. If you're going to do it automatically, it is not simple math. There, in fact, there's only now beginning to be PhD papers on it and stuff that really go into the more organized side of it all. Yes, it is important for production work, as Thomas is saying. But don't worry about that stuff now. Get into the sculpting side of things. Don't worry about production. Production comes, but an artist doesn't think about the final product You know, a sculptor doesn't think about, they think about the bronze, but their bronze is forced to obey the artist, not the artist bronze. All right, so we've got a lot of stuff in here. I'm going to do a quick check-in because I know my forms are kind of off a little bit. Find my halfway point. So I got to lift the skull. You can turn perspective off to really check some things. Yeah. I'm going to switch over to the Move brush, which I have set up on a hotkey, so that's why I switched over there real quick. And don't forget the cheek bows out and then back in to the ear hole. So even if you do something like what I just did right there, you got to look at this from below and don't cave that cheek in. Pull that maxilla out a little bit. There. Pull that orbit of the eye back a little bit. I'm going to switch back over to clay buildup. I'm going to work on the mound for the mouth. And then we'll switch over to our next tool. Okay. I'm going to leave the eyes. Actually, no. I want you to sculpt eyes. I'm going to sculpt the eye. Slightly. From a gestural perspective. You'll see in a lot of paintings when people are really quickly sketching in faces, they'll put that upper eyelid in, but not really that lower eyelid. And you'll see that in sculptures too, like Carpeau or something. If he's going to do if he has to do something really quick, he won't put in the lower eyelid. He'll just put the upper eyelid in there, into the orbit of the eye. All right. So the next thing we need to do is start to define some line work. Okay, so we used Move to establish proportion. We used clay buildup to get some structure, form, some cross-section, just to do some of the sculpting. Now we need a knife for line work to draw on the model. Sculptors draw on the model. I had this example as I had a model in yesterday, and I could not get this model's face to save my life. I painted that face like 5 times over the course of 3 hours. Incredibly exhausting. The only way I saved myself was I just picked up a brush and I started to draw form in with that brush directly into the wet paint. It's the same with sculpting, and that's what I'm going to show you right now is where is the nostril? What do the lips look like? What do the eyes look like? What is all of that stuff? So I need a knife, okay? And there are a couple of options. Okay, there's the dam standard. There's the standard. And there's /3. You can choose either one of them. Now they have special features. Okay, the dam standard has they have a pinch plus push. So it's really a pull and a push. They will push in and then gather everything around there to make it a nice clean line. The standard brush, just kind of blah. The slash brush, that's a pretty brush. We're going to look at all of them, just so you can kind of see it. So let's go in here. We're going to look at the standard brush. Where did it go? I'm going to lower my draw size really low, and I'm going to push in. I'm just going to go Z sub so you see it. In fact, let's do this in the back of his head so it's just a little clear. Okay. Nothing special. You can change the alpha. Let's say change the alpha to this one, alpha 39. Okay, but you can't really even see it at this resolution level. So when we get into this knife work, we start to get into this debate about geometry. And there's a lot here. So should I talk about geometry or should I talk about the knife? Let me interject the knife with a little talk about topology. And we're just doing this in the context of the knife. Okay, so let me provide kind of two contexts for tutorials and for what you'll see from artists. Okay, and I'm providing basically the spectrum of discussion on this. Okay, so you'll have some artists like Zach Petrock who believe in low res to high res. Okay. When I first started at Pixologic long time ago, Zach Petrock was like one of the leading artists kind of working with digital sculpting. He did that, the Captain Something of Tomorrow. Somebody will have to put it in chat if they can remind me. Really cool film. But because of the issues with ZBrush's Sky Captain, there we go, Steve. So because of the issues of hardware, there was only really the standard brush. So artists learned to work with very low-res models and slowly build up to the high-res. They were working with organized topology. So the organized topology was already low-res because what they were doing was working with the in-game or the in-film model. And they were using, basically at the high res, they were using this for displacement maps. Okay. Let's undo that. In-game model. So that was the structure. You had your in-game model or your in-film model. You went to ZBrush with it. You divided it upwards to create your displacement map. That was the end of the story. You didn't use ZBrush for anything else. At that point, people didn't really use it for jewelry. They didn't use it for toys per se, toy manufacturing or model manufacturing, anything like that. It was just your in-game or your in-film model and then use ZBrush for displacement maps. And at that point, ZBrush was competition to body paint. I remember plenty of meetings with guys at body paint and people using body paint and people in body paint pipelines, and there was discussion, does ZBrush replace it or not? Nobody really understood. ZBrush wasn't interested in displacement maps. That was just the stepping stone. They were interested in full artist creativity, and they've continued to be there. So they leapfrogged out of games into toys, into jewelry, into anything that we have to manufacture from an artistic perspective. So Zach Petrock and several other guys, you'll see they start with very low-res models. But then you see the newer guys. It's guys like Cesar Zambelli. And these guys work purely from high-res, almost entirely from high-res. And they do most of their form here. So I've got some people that have taken this class before. What is the problem with working high-res? High-res only. Anybody want to guess what that problem is? And I'll give you more than 0.5 seconds. John's got it. Establishing form is really hard with high res. And we can show that like on a body or something like that. If you have millions of polygons in a model, wow, I'm gonna have to delete this somehow. I'm gonna have to make this especially bad now that I'm doing it. You're gonna give him these weird fingers. Now he has to have these weird toes. I went into a career day at my daughter's school the other day, and somebody did a portrait of me with a hat, and it looked a lot like me. I was quite happy with it. So, anyways, how are you going to do this if you're starting with 1,000,000 polygons? Things get really hard. Okay, what if you need to, say, move an arm? You need to move it up. You need to bend it. Working with high res with lots of polygons, like millions of polygons at one time, can slow you down. If you don't understand this yet, don't worry. We will be coming back to it. But there are advantages to it. And the issue that I want you to keep in mind is that the low to high is based on topology dependence. So this is things like the standard brush. It's a topology dependent brush. You know, everything is related to you having organized topology to some extent or another. In order for things to go high res, you need topology independent brushes. And I've harped on that a little bit in this meeting because it is really, really one of the key things for you to understand about, from a structural perspective, how ZBrush works. They want topology independence. And remind me, we'll look at what topology independence is. Or we should do it now. I'm going to show you guys what topology independent is. It's real simple. I'm going to divide this model. I'm going to put my cursor up a little bit. So I've divided him. He is now 1.5 million polygons. And I can see that in that little area right there. Let me go back to it. 1,572,864 polygons. A lot of polygons. Let's use the standard brush. Let's say I want to fill this area in. Well, let's go Z-add. Let's turn that lazy mouse off. Uh-oh. I think I've lost tablet sensitivity. I have. Let me save this. Okay, and then I'm going to just try one thing to get rid of that. Let me say reset all brushes. Maybe I'm not understanding. Okay, there we go. I wasn't understanding. Okay, so we need to fill this area in. We can kind of moosh it around, right? And then we can kind of push this in a little bit and then fill this in a little bit and mush it. I'm trying to get this. And then fill this in, and eventually you get these problems where this form gets really just muddled, stretched, pulled together, ripped out this way. It's okay down here, but then it goes kind of nutty. The standard brush is always going to behave a little bit odd for things like this. But if I'm to do the same thing with the clay brush, you'll see a different behavior. Okay, so I'm going to come over here into clay buildup. I'm pushing this back in. I'm adding a little, and I'm going to just back here. Similar kind of strokes as what I was doing there, but the form is always kept this really nice, clean plane. Okay. The clay brush is going to behave well no matter where it's sculpting. Because by topology independence, what it's told to do is everything that is within this circle is what it's going to work on, and it's going to move everything up, everything back. The standard brush, on the other hand, will behave a little differently for things here, for things here, for things facing that way, facing down. It's going to behave differently for those guys. So it's not quite the same. Okay. Let me know if you got any more questions about topology independence. We will cover that more. All right. So I've divided the model more. We're going to work high res at this point. And let's get back to our knife tool, and then I'll stop and take some questions. So standard brush. Let's divide it 1, 2, 3, 1.5. So standard brush at a high res. Alt, push in. Try that alpha. Okay. Not bad, but not terribly sexy. Let's come into the damn standard brush. Who doesn't like saying that name? I don't need to press Alt, I just need to pull in. Okay, this is kind of a wonky valley. It's not very sexy. This is really loose, and then it's got that weird divot at the end, and this has a divot, and that has a divot, and you know, these are the standard brush. Not so nice. This is the damn standard brush, and you can see it pulls in, and that's a nice clean line. Okay, really good. But check out the /3 brush. Okay, very similar to the damn standard brush, but it doesn't pull geometry in. It doesn't edit anything. And so this is really my knife tool of choice, is /3. So I'm going to come around to the mouth, and that's where I'm going to start to set that guy up. And Z sub is already on. Yeah. Boom. Okay. Now we start to figure it out from there. Draw on your model. Okay, let me take a look at questions. Okay. Catherine, thanks for the advice. Didn't see that. Jose, so clay brush essentially move polys in one direction. Basically, that's the best way to think about it. They just affect it all and pull it straight up from one orientation. Okay, Deborah. Oh, let's see. I get it now. Spatial relations will change a lot while building the figure because of the geometry. This means a load of polygons. Wow, as a person who is strictly a painter and knows nada, the idea of changing one area around means you need to change the surrounding areas. But with ZBrush, it appears stuff adjusts. Okay, getting the language. Omar, sorry, indie versus dependent. Which was which? The clay brush is independent. Thanks, Nate. Scott, I did not say what makes the slash brush unique, but I can tell you right now. So I like the slash brush just because it's simple. But if you hover over the brush, you're going to see something that says brush type equals displace. That's just something for you to look at later. I don't want to get into it too much right now because there's a whole lecture on that. But that's something for you to go searching for. There are brush types. What do brush types mean? How do they relate? Okay, because you see we're using clay buildup here. And clay buildup is a clay brush. Don't worry though, we cover that. I love brushes. I love that whole system. So I'm in clay buildup, and now what I want you to be focused on is form. Okay, so I'm going to press Alt, and really this is what I want to show you, this is what I want to teach you, is how do you get the brush to do what you want? It doesn't happen automatic, you know, there's a little bit of trick. So let's take a look at this mouth, right? That's a little wonky a form. And then boom, 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 boom. All right. So there's some problems, right? It's not entirely working right. And then down here we've got some crazy form, and then that's happening, and then what's happening there? Oh, look what, oh, you know, there's a lot of stuff. I'm going to show you right now how you clean that up and how to use the brush. The single most important thing about this week is that you learn this part, this working with the clay buildup brush and the clay brushes to get the form you want. I understand. What I'm going to do right now revolves around all of my stuff related to, you know, my anatomy studies and things like that. And please remember, my anatomy study came from my own frustrations. Okay, so if you're frustrated with anatomy, get in and study it. Dig in. You know, it means it's something you're interested in. If you're frustrated with it, you're interested in it at least. Study it, and you can do it. It's just names, and it's just a map. So let's look at how we do this. I'll give you a preface. We're going to use Z-add and Z-sub. Okay, we're going to use those a lot, and then we're going to use tablet pressure. So at some points I'm going to do this lightly, at some points I'm going to press hard. You need tablet pressure for this to work though, so you need a Wacom of some sort, or a Wacom-like device. Okay, I'm going to choose to first establish a down plane, then I'm going to establish the up plane, then the down plane, and then the up plane, and then the down plane. Okay, that's just the general way in which the mouth works. If you really want to see some cool books on this, to kind of reference the individual asking for a book, you want to look for a guy named Edward. Somebody's going to have to spell that for me. I wasn't prepared to spell it. But I know I can spell this. Lanteri. Somebody wants to put that in chat, that'd be great. But Eduardo Lanteri, supposedly Rodin's teacher, and author of a very awesome book on sculpting, with probably some of the best advice you're going to get on sculpting, in my opinion. One of those things is don't sculpt women when you're first starting out. Not because they're tricksy, but because you can't see the anatomy. It's so hard. They're so, how do I say, smooth, you know, and then they're pretty, and holy crap, you try to sculpt pretty when you're first starting out, that is an exercise in frustration. Do not sculpt your girlfriend. She's not going to want to see herself sculpted by you in the very beginning unless she's incredibly supportive. Sculpt the guy. Sculpt somebody with bones. You need to see those. So there's something in chat, modeling, sculpting human figure, with Edward Lanteri. So I'm going to establish the planes first. And children. Oh, I haven't even sculpted my children yet. I'm waiting for that moment. The forms are so subtle. Okay. I'm pressing Alt. But I'm starting to lose it here. Okay, I'm going real slow. All right, I'm trying to be real slow, so I hope you find this useful and not too boring. But I have a problem right here. As I sculpt inwards, instead of it doing what I wanted, which is to kind of establish a plane, it has started to establish a cavern. So when that happens, I just change my approach a little bit. I don't press Alt. I add. This is when it needs the plane to be added in. So you go back and forth. Your goal the entire time is simple. Your goal is establish a plane. Nothing else. But sometimes you have to push in, sometimes you have to pull out. Okay. I'm going to pull out. Okay, that's going to be what I do for now. Now I'm going to add a little bit of clay here. And I don't know if I mentioned this already, but that's why it's called the clay brush. I went to Ofer, who's head of development, and the clay brush was built around the same time the flatten brush was the algorithm was changed. And this was all around the time that the program shall not be named came about. So we had people asking, you know, why don't you make the flatten brush like this or like that? And then he's doing the clay brush. So I'm working on the development side of things, and I'm like, guys, I'm hearing from some production people, you know, yada yada. We need to think about this flatten brush. What are you doing with this clay brush? What is this clay brush? I do not understand this clay brush. And it looks like it's kind of a worse flatten brush. What's going on? And I had that position for about a month until they got sick of me complaining, and they said, Ryan, just sculpt with the clay brush with an alpha, which basically became clay tubes. I made clay tubes, but the dev team were the ones that put me on there. So they said, use the clay brush, but assign this kind of square alpha, and let me know what you think. So I started sculpting with that, and then I never ever looked back. Clay brush has been the main brush all of us have used from that point on. So clay buildup is just, it's the same type of brush. We can go in clay tubes, you see it's the same alpha. Just a slightly different feature. But the thing that they said when I was like, what are you doing with this clay brush? He said, it's like adding a strip of clay. That's what it's about. It's like adding a strip of clay. Okay, and that's what we just did. We added a strip of clay. I'm going to pull this strip in a little bit on the sides, and then fill this area in, and then pull it out. Okay. Now, this isn't going to be the prettiest mouth right now because I'm explaining some technical stuff, and I'm not, how do I say it? The demo is not perfect, but I'll redo it from scratch with less talky and more of my own brain working. But even at 1.5 million polygons, this is handling it just fine. So I'm filling this area in. And I don't know if you've heard this, but this line's really important. If you want to learn about facial anatomy, I recommend checking out plastic surgery sites and textbooks. Us artists are missing an enormous amount of language for the face. But these guys live, and their whole careers are built around the language of the face. You know, think about, I'm going to say this, but I don't mean this, you know, this isn't a big religious conversation, but before the 1900s, for example, Christmas was celebrated very differently. But with the age of advertising and things, Christmas became a bit of a different beast than it was, you know, 120 years ago. Now we give presents, it's this big celebration, there's the 12 days of Christmas, all of that stuff. You know, the 12 days of Christmas is, you know, a bit of a, it's a term that a marketer can use. It's a word that can change your behavior. Words have power. As an artist, that's, you know, that's the sociologist talking over there. But as an artist, if you don't have a word for something, you may not ever know it exists. You don't necessarily need to always remember the word, right? Like, I can still go back to Prague in the Czech Republic, and I can walk anywhere I want. I know exactly where I want to go. I don't remember any of the names, okay? I remember some of it, you know, let's say Narodny Třída, okay? Or let's say Staroměstská Square, okay? I'm just giving you random words. I still remember these things. Or how do I get to that one bar that, we hung out that one night? Well, I'm going to have to walk through alleys, but I know the alleys. I've forgotten the words, but I know them. But first, I had to learn them. So you got to know these words, anatomy words, and that's what plastic surgeons do. So for example, okay, there are 2 words here that plastic surgeons use. Why would plastic surgeons need extra words for the nose? Anybody want to take a guess? Why would a plastic surgeon need words to describe the nose? Planes, shape. It's so he can live in the McMansion. I just told you why. With Christmas and the 12 days of Christmas, I gave you my sociological perspective. He needs words because he needs to live in the McMansion. And I'm half joking here, but there's truth to it. This is called the tip defining point. This is called the facet. Now, Halloween's saying common understanding, but this is not common understanding. This is, how do I talk to a patient that I'm about to put under general anesthesia who is going to suffer pain for at least a month, and if I screw up, potentially for the rest of her life, right? Who has probably seen relatives whose noses are now starting to cave in because plastic surgery was not done that well, 20, 30 years ago. How do I talk to them and get them to, do a surgery? Well, you have to have the language. So you say, we're going to work on that tip define. I'm going to really accentuate your tip defining point. Or, you know what, the tip defining point is just a little bit off center on you. I'm going to move it over here, and it's going to be a little bit more like Angelina Jolie. And then he's going to pull up a thing of Angelina Jolie, and he's going to point, and you can say, see, that's her tip defining point. We are going to sculpt your nose like that. And then he's going to end up in the McMansion, and life is going to be good, so to speak. Makes sense? You need the words. That's kind of a funny little jokey way to say it. But you need the words, because you have to talk to that patient inside yourself and say, look, you're going to have to study this stuff, and you're going to have to spend a couple of years learning these words and learning this anatomy, and you're going to have to do away with a little bit of sleep, and you're not going to have necessarily everything that you want because you're spending 3 hours studying anatomy. But if you do it, then you're going to be able to explain it to people, you're going to be able to teach it, you're going to be able to sculpt these faces, you're going to be able to make a career and a living. Still to this day, realistic faces is one of the hardest things for our people to do. It really is one of the hardest things for our people to do. You've heard of the uncanny valley, right? The way over the uncanny valley is a bridge. It's a bridge full of words and knowledge. It's a lot of knowledge. Okay, let's get back to the planes here. I'm going to break this up a little bit. I'll tell you a little anatomy. Orbicularis oris. Everybody thinks of the orbicularis oris, the mouth muscle, as, let's say, a sphincter muscle. Okay, a sphincter muscle is just one that kind of contracts inwards. But it's a misnamed. It's not the correct way. The way you want to think about the orbicularis oris is that it is 4 muscles interrelated and connecting at different points. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the 4 independent muscles, okay? But you need to know more about it than that. You need to know fiber direction. So don't forget that there are nodules on the side. And then when we are talking about the upper lip, this is where things are important. The fibers run differently. There are fibers that run across and down. And then there are these fibers, I'm going to paint in green, coming from the nodule. So it's almost like they kind of cross. And the red muscle fibers kind of move into this corner. The lower part doesn't have that same drama, but this is something to consider and to be thinking about as you sculpt. So first thing that really says to me is I need to kind of separate the side here. I need to put that nodule in there. And I pull the nodule fibers this way, and then I pull these fibers this way. Like that. Okay, and then you can pull the triangularis or the depressor anguli down, then you get the mentalis, and you got a shaping from there to do. Now, because I had the knowledge, I was able to do something decent with some, some really crappy beginnings. But I think I kind of want to go back now, and let me see if I can go back quickly enough. And I'm just going to start that over from scratch and see if I can do it relatively quickly. Make dragging equals lagging. Mark, screen dragging is due to amount of graphic. Yes, okay. Some people are experiencing a little bit of a lag. So depending on your internet connection, that can happen. I do recommend you go to speedtest.net. Check it out if you're streaming this. If you're watching it off the site, then it's a bit of a different deal. Mine shouldn't have that. Okay. Now I'm going to go into artist mode, so I'm going to stop talking here a little bit. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to produce a better result, but I'm just accessing different tools. Yeah, and I don't know what I want to do with it. Because I want it to be kind of pouty, but it's not really working the way I want. /3. I pressed B on the keyboard, S for the S brushes, and 3 because that's the little extra one. So you can see I can press R, B, A. B as in boy. Okay, hotkey I have set up a 5. And who knows where that's going now. Okay. Now the problem with clay brush or clay buildup is these strokes. So I'm going to jump ahead, the chatter I should say. I'm going to jump ahead and I want to show you how to fix that. You fix it up here in the stroke palette. Stroke, set your lazy step to 0.05. As soon as you do that though, it'll become a little bit more extreme, so you want to lower your Z intensity. But it definitely lowers the amount of noodling that you have to do. I'm going to get what they call the columella, really extreme. Okay, I'm going to get what they call the alar facial juncture, a triangle right there. I'm going to come in with the clay build if I'm going to get the alar cartilage. I'm going to get the nostril wing. I really want to see you just sculpt that, focus on curvature. So you can see I build up and then I press Alt while I move the model in different directions. And this moving in different directions and smoothing things out, of course, helps me really just get a bit of a better grasp on, it just helps me create the form better the way I want it. I'm carving out for where that cheek would be. Okay, alar cartilage is going to come around and around and around, and then it comes onto the inside. But then I'm going to put my facet and my tip defining point. Lateral cartilage, the nostril area, nasal bone. Okay, some bone, some muscle that kind of glides across on me. You can see that when I raise my eyebrows. Not everybody has it so dominant. Okay, and I'm getting the upper eyelid. I'm just going to connect it to the side of the eye and then pull it out. And I really want to give it a bit of a lip. I don't want you thinking too much about ZBrush features per se right now, like Dynamesh. Spend some time just getting a head or two heads. And depending on when you're watching this, I mean, Halloween is of course one of the best topics for this. Frontal process of the maxilla, I'm just changing that. Basically, I'm changing the shape of his maxilla. Okay. I'm going to come around with the zygomatic. I'm going to put a bony point here on the zygomatic and a bony point down here. And then it drops. Okay, I'm not looking at questions yet. I'll get right there in a sec. Pushing that temporal line. Superciliary arch. Okay, I'm going to show you a trick for cleaning this up shortly. Okay. That's going to take a little more work for me to figure out how that operates. I'm not going to sweat it right now. And now I'm going to sculpt an ear at a high resolution level, which would normally be intensely painful. But because I'm working with topology independent brushes, some things become easier. Dig the hole in. tragus, antitralix, helix, antihelix. See how clean that clay buildup brush works? Okay, there we go. Okay, it's turned into a bit more of an anatomy lesson than I wanted, but the most important thing is really focusing on how this clay buildup works. Not the technical stuff, but how do you create the form that you want? That's going to be the questions I really want to answer and see examples of. Okay. So we've got something, right? What time is it now? We're at about 2 hours. Let me check in with you guys and see how we're doing here. So I'm going to answer a few questions now. Anatomy, Thomas, anatomy versus physiology. I was always better at remembering the function than the geography. Well, for us, geography is what's relevant. Function becomes important when you get into motion and expression, 100%. But actually, Thomas, what you're interested in is artistic anatomy, and that is a combination of different things, but one is morphology. So you'll see this. Oh, how do I forget? I always forget things when I go live. Artistic anatomy, Robert Beverly Hale. And then also there is a French book that he references a lot that goes into in-depth reference on morphology. Let's see if I can remember that. All right. Okay. Okay, some connection problems, but some people are okay. Scott is asking, where in ZBrush can we find the list of hotkeys taken? You can't find it in ZBrush per se, but you can't find a list. But if you hover over something, like see how I'm hovering over clay buildup, you see that number 5? The number 5 means that's assigned. That's assigned to number 5. Okay, Deborah, I'm so glad you're using anatomy. One does not always have a reference to copy. Yep. Great. Thanks, Deborah. Thomas, does the brush shoot like an arrow straight in from view plane, or is it towards nodal of model? Let me see if I understand you. Does the brush shoot like an arrow straight in, or is it towards nodal of model? Thomas, if I understand correctly, well, let me just talk about the brush. It's not cut and dry what the brush does. I didn't like that. These forms are getting wonky. Okay. The brush there's several variables, but look at how, see the circle is facing this way. And then as I move it over to the side, facing another way. So this circle is telling you the orientation, meaning it's going to be facing, whatever effect it's having, it's going to have perpendicular to this plane. That's the easiest way for you to see it. you can get a little deeper by going into the picker palette and orientation. You can get a little deeper by going into the brush palette and into samples, stabilize, ortho, things like that. But in general, it's perpendicular to that circle. Let me know if that answers it. Roberto, when is it time to subdivide? Roberto, do you remember when we were working on the knife on the back of the head and everything was very pixelated? And it was very, very rough. The truism I used to give people was to work like a painter. You use the largest brush possible for as long as possible, okay? Which means that you divide when you need to put form in and you can't get it. So for example, at subdivision level 2, I can't really get the slash brush and see what it's doing. But at subdivision level 4, I can make that work. So I'm dividing it until I can make things work. But as I said, some people quite simply will divide a sphere up to 1 million polygons and work on it from there. Jack, can you cut a hole in a mesh like an eye hole in a mask? Yes, you can, and we will cover that. But I don't want you to get advanced like that. I really want you to just focus on sculpting and getting control over this brush. Getting it to curve the way you want it to. And just behave the way that you really, really want it to. That's the most important thing for us right now. John, we'll take some getting used to, but I have been converted about concepting at high res. Yeah. Yeah, the great thing about high res is that you don't fight the geometry. You know, you have to fight it in another way. Thomas, you can boolean the eye. Let's not get too complicated. Would you recommend traditional sculpting to supplement our digital sculpting? Reese, my goal is to teach you in a traditional way. So traditional sculpting helps because you work from a live model and it's easier to see a lot of form. But my goal is always to communicate traditional sculpting truths, so to speak. I always do that with the eyes. Robert Beverly Hale, Anatomy Lessons from the Great Masters, yes. And Paul Richet, which is me being an American. I think it's like Richter or something like that. Something much better than Richet. Let's see. Thomas, does outer circle grab average from rim of circle? Thomas, that kind of discussion really, Thomas is asking, within this sphere, what is ZBrush doing with all these different, what they call normals? And a normal is the direction of a polygon. So for example, that polygon's facing that way, this polygon's facing this way. You know, these guys are facing that inside, and then that kind of transitions. That, in a nutshell, although it is a little more complicated, in a nutshell, ZBrush is averaging everything that is within that circle. Excuse me, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. It's averaging the normal of everything in that circle, and it will choose one normal. You can sway that normal one way or another, but in general it's going to average it all out, everything. It takes the normal of everything within the brush's purview. And the other thing, Thomas, is don't think about this brush as just a circle. Think of the brush as a sphere. If you think of it as a sphere, that's when you'll really understand that it's literally taking everything inside there. Like let's say, for example, let's switch over to clay buildup. It's going to take everything within that sphere. In this particular case, it's taking it from the sphere of that inside circle. So because we have some kind of drift from focal shift, you know, it's not a hard focal shift, then we lose a little bit at the edges. Okay. Tilo, I have a question about symmetry plane. I was working on an object and got it off axes. Is the frame but put everything back symmetrical? Tilo, in order, if you lose symmetry, there's a couple of options. You can go into deformation and try resim and smart resim. The other thing you can try is you go into geometry, and I think it's under modify, and it's a mirror and weld. So it's tool, geometry, modify, mirror and weld. That's gonna establish. That's not going to change where it's symmetrical now per se. It'll just trim and cut. But those are things to consider. Otherwise, we'll have to wait to get a little bit more involved in it. Rick is asking about perspective view. So perspective is on. I sculpt in perspective. Not everybody sculpts in perspective. I know plenty of guys that do not sculpt in perspective. I do not understand that because the model just doesn't look right to me. You know, when it's not in perspective. I kind of want it to be here. But some people do. Now, the variable that people ask is this real perspective? And it is real perspective, but the one thing that you have to remember is that you only have a few options for turning and changing what the camera is looking at. ZBrush by default is looking at the center of the canvas. So if you have a really high, you can see as you move it off into the corner, you can see things get crazy, right? You can go to draw and you come in here align to object. And that means that no matter where it is, it will apply that to the center of that model. Now this is, so basically we have two options. You either have the center of the canvas or you have the center of the model. The problem comes when you have photo reference and your photo reference was focused in between the eyes. Or it was maybe from the top of the head coming in a certain angle, or maybe, you know, like let's say for example you've got a camera here and the reference for the person is over here. Well, that means that the focal point would be basically, in terms of this character, would be off to the side here. So you can't really adjust where that is per se. You can do tricks that are beyond what I want to get into right now, but you can do tricks to change things. And then also the other thing to keep in mind is angle of view. This is a bit of a difficult one for people because if you look at Maya, if I remember right, Maya has a focal angle. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe it has a focal angle, and then it has something else. I've forgotten what that was. But basically, angle of view is not, N-O-T, is not focal angle. It is the opposite of focal angle. Do not know why. That's a bit too close in names to each other, but that's something else to consider if you're matching up. Rick, let me know if that helped. Steve, I have trouble getting enough detail around the lacrimal controlling sculpting for eyelids. Steve, this is sometimes a geometry issue. Sometimes it's just lowering your draw size. Try that. And go with smaller strokes and more sensitive strokes and just slowly build up. See if you can make that happen. John, when moving plus Alt at lower res, I get a lot of popping. John, when you're saying you're pressing Alt and then suddenly it pops like this, or it instantly jumps? So if it's any of those, then it's really just a matter of what buttons you're pressing. Okay, and then also sometimes, I think they got rid of this. It used to be if you clicked move, it would pop full frame. But I can give you a bit of a warning up front. ZBrush is very dependent on those keys down at the bottom of your keyboard. Shift, Control, Alt. And they have, it takes a little getting used to, but don't worry. Okay, Scott, I thought outer circle was focal shift. Scott, inner circle is focal shift. Hope that helps. Thomas?
Ryan?
Yeah.
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt. John was actually asking about using Alt in conjunction with the move brush to move along the normals.
Ah, okay. So when using the move brush, I wonder what popping means. Does he explain later? It's like it's bouncing in and out versus just smooth pulling. Well, I can tell you what move. If you're using the move brush and you press Alt, well, I mean, I'm getting some pretty smooth and pulling out. This just pulls out along the normal. So I'm pressing Alt with the move brush. The only thing I can think of that would cause some stuttering inside of ZBrush is if it's having some performance issues with RAM. That's all I can think of. Sorry, John, wish I could help that one more. Okay, Deborah's asking, oh wait, Thomas was asking, so go small if you get close to a sharp edge. Yes, definitely go small. That's great. Thomas is mentioning that if you're getting close to a sharp edge, you want to use a smaller brush so that it doesn't kind of collapse in per se. Because like if we use clay buildup right now, it's fine there, but if we come in here and do this, let's do it like that. You can see it here. The insides pushed and merged with the outsides. So that's one option. But, and don't worry, I'll explain this later, but if you really want to know, you can also go auto masking, backface masking. That'll also help. Thomas. Deborah, I know what polygons are, but how important is it to understand the tech of polygons as it relates to creating figures? Deborah, you don't need to understand the tech. I'm going to teach you the tech. The tech may sink in, it may not sink in. Don't sweat it. If it doesn't sink in fully, the most important thing, and I'll generally tell you, at least for today, it's getting control of the clay buildup brush. Get control of that brush. That's what you need. You don't need to understand polygons, topology, independence, any of that in order to sculpt. I know plenty of sculptors who don't draw and they still sculpt. The important thing is you understand how to create form. Catherine, why is it called focal angle when it's really focal length? Focal length of the eye is, you know what? There was a discussion about this angle of view, and angle of view is a proper term, but I will leave this as it's being confused. And I don't remember if in Maya it is focal length. Yeah, it reads as being called focal angle, is what Catherine is saying. Angle of view reads as being called focal angle. Correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine. But yeah, I understand the confusion. Alas. Reese is asking about the systems, hardware, ergonomics setup. I do not have anything, but as I tell everybody, the most important thing for ZBrush is your memory and your processor. Generally, most computers will have enough memory because ZBrush will only use 4 gigs anyways. So in today's world, it's your processor, and it's how many processors and whether it's hyper-threaded. If it's hyper-threaded, that's great. Fred is asking, is there a quick key command to center the object? There is. It's called frame. Where did it go? Did they move it? Or is that it down here? It's right up here. Or F. And you can see the F right next to the name that tells you what its hotkey is. This does not lock to a front or a side or anything. So remember, and you'll learn this when you go into the rotate and you check out the more information, the shift. You have to press shift to lock. Check out their lectures, they'll have that for sure though. All right, Orla's asking about saving. Not a problem, Orla, it's not too simple. Okay, in some tutorials that you see out on the web, you'll see something that says save your tools. If you save your tool, you will only save this one tool. This guy will be lost forever, an eternity, never to be seen again, disappeared. If you save this as a file project, then it will live for as long as your hard drive lives. And as I say that, I worry about my hard drive. I'm sorry, honey. Don't worry. You're going to last forever. So you'll want to save your projects. File, save as. Reese, Maya has file, angle of view. They must have changed it. Okay. Focal length. What's with the dynamic feature, Jose's asking? Dynamic. Check out my brush size right now. I switched to dynamic, and there we go. As I move the model around, dynamic means that the draw size, let's get the draw size so it's the size of the eye. That means that it'll stay the same size relative to the model. If you turn dynamic off, doesn't matter what size the model is, it'll always be the same size relative to the canvas. Roberto, is there a quick save file in the Lightbox browser? Yes. Lightbox, quick save, and this has been saving everything I've been doing since I opened up ZBrush. It will only save 10. So what is this? 4, 3, and 3. So that's 10. And it just deletes the older one. Let me know if that helps. Stephen, could you at some juncture discuss the angle of view setting and how it relates to camera lenses? I can. Today is not the best time, but I can. Let's see, Riley. The alt-move popping might be the fault of an overclocked CPU or memory rate. Sounds great. Thanks, Riley. Mark is getting into calculus, and he gave us a link. Everybody can learn some calculus. I have a calculus for dummies button, book, sorry. There should be a button. So I've read both of them the same. Can we return somehow to quick front view? You can. You rotate it and press shift. Rotate and press shift. And then let go of shift. and it's upside down, if your model is upside down, you'll get the hang of this. And make sure you check out the lectures. But really, one step at a time, rotate around, press shift. In the beginning, it's like you're in 0G, and so it's kind of confusing. Anybody seen that movie Gravity? That was pretty awesome. But you will get the hang of it quickly. Fred, can you explain why it's called a tool? I can. And Fred is asking, why do we call 3D models tools? The hint is here in this quick palette or big thumbnail. Notice how it says 2.5D brushes. Well, ZBrush was not always a sculpting program. It was this kind of quasi-sculpting program that allowed you to paint in depth. So it had all these tools that allowed you to paint something in the distance or color this pixel or color this thing that was closer to you. And so they added 3D models to that tool set, and then 3D models became the dominant things people used, and we didn't use tools anymore. But it was too late to change the name because all the documentation had been written. I mean, think of what you'd have to do with Google to re-index all of those tutorials. I hope that answers you, Fred. Rafi, any advantages using a Cintiq? I use a Cintiq, but I use an Intuos forever. No big advantages, but I like that I move my shoulder for the Cintiq. Catherine, don't you have to save the history to save the original form when saving a project? You do not need to save history, Catherine. It will save, but sometimes history becomes very large, like you can see in my counter. Or let's go and edit. That's 2,000 undos. You may or may not want to save that, and it will get large. So you can delete them if you don't need them. But you can also save them without it. So you go into Preference. Let's see, where is it? Undo History. Enable Saving. Turn that off. When you save it, it's not going to save your history. And it's just a click off. I know that they are working on file size. I know this is Undo History it's crazy powerful. So they're working on making that as quick and as simple to do as possible. Matthew's commenting on the dynamic size. I understand you. Damon, the spiral of the ear is similar to the orbit of the eye, it seems. It is. It is. You are starting to see into the secret structure of humanity. The next step, Damon, is that we make you a member of the, what is that? Da Vinci Code sect? It's so secret I've forgotten the name. Let's do the Freemasons. We don't want to be the Illuminati. I love the history of different artists. Leonardo da Vinci was part of them. Was it the Freemasons or was it the Illuminati? Now I'm all mixed. Opus Dei, that was the bad one. All right, let's see. Matthew, Damon, Matthew. Glad you like the 2.5 note. Yeah, it's crazy. ZBrush has a ton of history in it. Thomas, Ryan, when you explain subtools, can you please draw examples of those of us coming from Photoshop's and layers? I can, but subtools are completely unrelated to layers, as you'll find out. Alrighty, guys, I think we are in good shape. We're at 2.5 hours now, and the most important thing for me today is to meet you, give you a sense of the system, how you access the class, all of that, and then give you a sense of sculpting with that brush, clay buildup. You want to use move, you want to use slash, but I really want to see what you do with clay buildup. So now the next steps for you. What else are you supposed to do today or this week? So you're in week 1. If you haven't seen this, then go through it. It's not terribly long, but we've covered a lot of this already as well. So if you feel like you're getting it, just skip to the next lecture. Download them so you've got them, but they're here for you forever as well. Okay, and then next week we are going to go through this, which involves sculpting from life. Not from life, sorry, I wish. Sculpting from reference and then going into subtools and explaining how these things work. So these lectures will be made available to you on Tuesday next week, and then the following Saturday I will cover those as well. The Thursday meeting will not cover this content. Thursday meeting will go through this stuff. And it'll be a meet and greet. Nate will handle it. And it'll be a meet and greet for those who missed today. So if you were already here, don't worry about Thursday. It's one or the other. And we'll switch it up. Sometimes Nate will do Saturday, sometimes Thursday. The goal is to be as available for you as possible. That's really what I want. You and I both have the fortune of being in the early days of online training and the early days of our platform. So I'm really grateful that I get to keep all channels open for as long as possible. You know, investors come in, stuff like that come in, then they'll start to shut down start to hone this thing. They'll say they'll start to refine it. I say they're starting to break my spirit, man. Okay. Thanks, Rick. Roberto, what would you like me to repeat, Roberto? You want me to repeat that last part? Love you, Roberto. I will I will get this uploaded as quickly as possible. But as for the homework, just post your projects. Post your week 1 projects. Okay, Camtasia died. Good. All right, Adolfo, Mauricio, Frederick, Pierre, Michael, Damon, Paul, Peter, Roberto, Joanne, Ellen, Mark, Georgie, Jose, Ian, Deborah, Wayne, Reese. Thank you guys so very much. Mark, 1 polygon usually has at least 3 vertices, 4 if it's a quad, so it's an end count. Okay, cool. Alrighty, guys. Good luck with your sculpting. Please do not get too technical. You have 10 weeks to get technical. Okay, let's just sculpt. This week, sculpt the head, sculpt 5 heads, do some anatomy studies, do it lightly. Don't get technical with the anatomy. Don't get technical with ZBrush. I understand that you may be technical, Mark, but you're also an artist. Nobody is 100% one or the other, and you are an artist. Being an artist is part of being a human. I do not believe they are separated. So focus on that. Try to bring that one out. Just faces, good, bad, great. Just sculpt your faces and post them up. You guys can also comment, I think, on each other's work. You just click. Commenting will be made easier in time but that's probably several weeks away. But you can leave comments. I wish you could leave comments from this page, but that's going to take a moment. Mark, that's funny. All right, guys, take care of yourselves. Have a fantastic weekend. I'll check in with you on Thursday as well. I'll check in on the questions, and then we have the email. Just so you know, the email. That's great. Just so you know, our office hours are basically we're here Tuesday through Saturday because we work Saturdays. We are not here Sundays and Mondays. So Sundays and Mondays, if you email us, we won't necessarily get back to you right away, but we will on Tuesday. All right. If somebody wants to save the chat log, that's fine with me. You have to email it to me or Nate. Yeah, you have to email it. I can't save mine because it shows everybody's email addresses. It's just one of the things. Thanks, Reese. All right. Anybody want to let me know they have a chat log saved, and I will go from there. Okay. All right. See you guys. Have fun. I'm signing out.
The organized